Yes. We set that up, actually, Michael. If everybody could please remember to turn off their phone volumes. That is the very first thing I want to encourage. Make sure your phones are off. And let's start. I'm really, this is off script at the moment, but I am so pleased to see everyone in the room. So many different folks, all converging around this theme. I really, honestly, I didn't expect it to be like this, and I am so grateful to all of you for being here today. Welcome to the Cannabis and Environmental Stewardship Symposium. I'm Dominic Corva, Assistant Professor of Sociology and Program Lead for our brand new Cannabis Studies major. The assistants you see walking around, those are Cannabis Studies majors, and I am so grateful for their help on all of this. The 2024 Cannabis and Environmental Stewardship Symposium is funded through the Land-Sea Connection Program of the Resources Legacy Fund, made possible by the Keith Campbell Foundation for the Environment. I am especially grateful to Alex Loomer, who put us in contact and has been a tremendous support making this event happen from concept to finish. We gather here in the Native American Forum, which was designed to provide a cultural center for the use of Native American students, faculty, and staff. In addition, it was to be utilized as a community facility specifically for Cal Poly Humboldt Native American serving departments, Native American Studies, the Center for Indian Community Development, the Indian Natural Resources Science and Engineering Program, and the Indian Tribal and Educational Personnel Program. We are grateful to these departments for allowing us to host the event in this space. I want to open this symposium by doing a land acknowledgement, greatly informed by the work and words of Dr. Cutcha Rising Baldy, Professor of Native American Studies here at Cal Poly Humboldt. There's two parts to it. The first is that the Cannabis Studies program in the Department of Sociology acknowledged that Cal Poly Humboldt is located on the unceded lands of the Wiyot people, where they have resided from time immemorial. This includes the Wiyot tribe, Bear River Rancheria, and Blue Lake Rancheria. Wiyot peoples continue to remain in relationship to these lands through ceremony, culture, and stewardship. They are important parts of not only the history of this area, but also in continuing knowledges of this place. What does this land acknowledgement compel me to do is a question that Dr. Baldy encourages us to ask ourselves, in addition to having this land acknowledgement. I am compelled to acknowledge some things about the recent history of cannabis in this area, as they relate to practices of environmental stewardship and the lands of the Wiyot people. Land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current, ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. No one has done more to contextualize the ongoing relationship between cannabis industrialization and settler colonialism than Native American Studies professor Dr. Caitlin Reed, who recently published a book called Settler Cannabis. First, the history of cannabis in this area involved and continues to involve an industry predicated upon the organization of land into private property owned by people who were not here 200 years ago. We are all newcomers to Wiyot territory. Settler colonialism is an iterative historical process, not something that just happened in the distant past. Additionally, the recent history of cannabis in this area is that it developed a reputation for extractive industrial practices associated with commodity capitalism against the spirit of land stewardship practiced by Native peoples. A lot of the environmentally destructive practices of the Green Rush were first noticed and documented on tribal lands in the 2000s by Murad Gabriel, a former associate of the Humboldt Institute for Interdisciplinary Marijuana Research that I now co-direct. Extractive practices associated with the Green Rush also overwhelmed the environmentalist and communitarian legacy of hippie new settlers of the 1960s and 1970s, whose early profits from cannabis cultivation significantly went back into the land they lived on and the communities they lived with. Hippie weed money launched, staffed, and later helped professionalize the restoration sector in this region. That legacy remains here, not only in the ubiquity of environmental restoration nonprofits in the region, but also in the practices of multi-generational cultivators associated with the regenerative cannabis cultivation practices that, in many cases, transcend those of their hippie New Settler forebears. At this point, I want to show a slide because 11 years ago, in this very room, a coalition of environmental nonprofit actors and ecologically minded cannabis cultivators held the first symposium about cannabis and the environment at this university. Dr. Tony Salvaggio, now chair of the sociology department, organized the symposium to address emergent concerns about cannabis cultivation and the cumulative impacts of the green rush as it metastasized throughout the region. At that moment, the cultural links between the restoration sector and the cannabis sector in this area were strained beyond recognition by the public. The new brand of cannabis as an extractive industry displaced the New Settler brand of cannabis as ecological and communitarian. Today, a market crash has drastically changed the composition of California's cultivation industry. A lot of people have been displaced economically and physically from their livelihoods and homes. This cleansing fire has, however, substantially cleared the area from people with extractivist practices motivated strictly by commercial interests. The creative destruction of the last 6 years has made space for the cannabis sector and the restoration sector to reconnect. This means different things, from regenerative cannabis practices to funding water tanks and solar energy infrastructure to developing appellations defined significantly by environmental standards and practices. It also means that the restoration sector itself provides livelihood diversification for people and families fighting displacement from their homes and communities. Those who remain because they are part of the communities embedded in places of surpassing beauty and environmental diversity. They aren't doing this to get rich. They're doing this to stay in place, connected to their friends and families. They share far more in common with their hippie forebears than with their recently mostly departed Green Rush peers. This symposium is inspired by the return to legacy cannabis values necessary for both ecological and economic sustainability. A healthy cannabis cultivation sector will be defined by stability and compatibility with the communities it lives with, rather than agro-industrial race to the bottom that exploits people, places, and the planet. There are many opportunities and challenges in front of us, but as I like to tell my students, we're at the beginning of something, not the end. And there are so many opportunities and avenues to make a difference in the value and values of post-prohibition cannabis. I am incredibly grateful to our distinguished panelists, moderators, and everyone who has helped make this happen, and again want to highlight our Native American Forum hosts who let us be here today. Thank you, and let's begin.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for that introduction. My name is Ross Gordon. I am the Policy Director for Humboldt County Growers Alliance, and we're the trade association for cannabis operators here in Humboldt County. I see a lot of friendly faces here in the audience today. I also serve as policy chair for Origins Council. Origins Council is a nonprofit research and advocacy organization partnered with a legacy producing communities throughout California. So Origins Council's regional council includes Humboldt County Growers Alliance, but also the Mendocino County Cannabis Alliance, Trinity County Agricultural Alliance, Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, and the Big Sur Farmers Association on the Central Coast as well. And I know a lot of folks have driven a long way from all those different parts of our state to be here today. And as Origins Council, really, our mission and our task is really to support our legacy producing communities in rural areas around the state of California. I really want to thank RLF and Alex Loomer for organizing this event today. I really want to thank Dominic. I know that Dominic has put an incredible amount of effort in his very busy schedule to make sure that this has been put together and has been well organized. And I'm so excited to see so many people here today. Want to thank the Native Forum for hosting us today. Thank everyone who's attending today. And I especially want to acknowledge and thank the farmers who have showed up today. And one thing I really appreciate about this event and its organization and its inception is it's the first event I can remember that brings together regulators and academics and environmental stakeholders and cannabis farmers for an event that's about cannabis farmers and that is actually truly accessible for cannabis farmers to be present. I think often something that I've seen in my work is that there's a lot of conversations about cannabis farmers and environmental stewardship that happen without cannabis farmers being in the room and being part of the conversation. And I really appreciate that this event has been organized in a way to enable the farmers in our community to be present. And in the panels that I know will happen later today, we'll also really center farmers and farmers' voices as a significant part of the conversation. So this panel is about regulating environmental stewardship, and very grateful to be joined by regulators from Department of Cannabis Control, Department of Food and Agriculture, the Water Board, and Department of Fish and Wildlife, and very excited to hear all of your presentations. By way of introduction, and I want to start on sort of a personal note and reflecting on how Dominic sort of framed and started this conversation. I'm somebody who moved to Humboldt County relatively recently, in 2019. My engagement with cannabis policy started really very recently by, I think, most people's standards here. In 2015, I was working for a law firm in Oakland, working with folks who were operating under the Proposition 215 framework. And in that role, I met many farmers who were operating under Proposition 215 and really formed very strong relationships with many of those farmers. And when I moved to Humboldt County in 2019, I began to better understand the sort of environmental threat narrative that I think you heard from Dominic. And the way in which legalization in this area was really framed by these fears around environmental threat, which were very real, right? And the green rush was very real, and the impacts of that were very real. At the same time, what I saw in the farmers who I met during that time were really environmental stewards. And there were really people who felt very strongly about the land, about the community, about the environment, and about really cultivating cannabis in a way that honors the medicine and the plant and the land. And as we move forward into a regulatory framework, what I found personally is that these farmers who really were seeking to be good environmental stewards were really struggling to understand and be a part of this tremendously complex, expensive regulatory framework that we have. And at the same time, talked to and saw many regulators and researchers and academics who I think were struggling to understand and doing their best to understand the reality of the practices on the ground, both some of the problematic practices that were out there, but also the really regenerative and constructive practices that were happening as well. 6 years later, I think it's really important to ground this conversation in the reality. Our farmers who are environmental stewards, who are really truly connected to the land, who are really truly connected to the plant and the medicine, let's all be honest, are not making it. Dominic has framed this conversation in terms of a cleansing fire, and I think that's a really interesting phrase to think about. I think it's an optimistic phrase, and maybe a hopeful phrase, but I think on our current course, and I encourage everyone to talk to the farmers here and see if they agree or disagree with this, on our current course, that cleansing fire is going to consume nearly every farmer in this room. And so I think today it is incumbent on all of us to have a real grounded conversation about that reality and to think about what we can do collaboratively to recognize that, work together, and see what we can do to change that course. So with that, I know our panelists have all prepared remarks. Each of our panelists today operates either a regulatory program for cannabis, an incentives-based program, or both. All of them, I think, have an incredible, important part to play in this conversation. So I'm very excited to hear from all of them. And I think we will start with Nicole.
You bet. You guys hear me okay? I want to make sure you can. So I might just yell. Yeah, I'm just going to yell. Okay. Not yell. Speak loudly. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Humboldt for having this convening. Alex, thank you, and RLF for supporting it. It's so wonderful to be in the presence of everyone in this room. It's an awesome group of people. We've spent the last couple of days up here talking to a lot of farmers and operators, getting to spend time with a lot of the students in this room, the future generation, with brilliant minds and a lot of passion in this space. It's been just a really refreshing time. Always good to get out of Sacramento, candidly, and spend time in beautiful places like this with beautiful people. It's a tough act to follow, but I do want to acknowledge as somebody who studied sociology, I really, really appreciated hearing Dominic's framing, but also hear Ross's warning. So just to give you guys a little bit of background, I think you guys all know the Department of Cannabis Control, but if you don't, our responsibility is to license and regulate the commercial cannabis industry, as well as to address illegal activity across the state of California. I got a lot of questions from students last night about how I landed in this position and what is meaningful to me about this position. And I always boil it down to three things: the people, the process, and the purpose of this role. The people are you guys, right? The people who have true stories, real investments. This is your life. You're passionate about it. And in the conversations we've had over the last couple of days, I've commented to my team that passion is just, it's infectious. It comes across really clearly when talking to operators about the passion in their work, especially in this community that has such a rich history in multi-generational engagement in this space. And so that's the kind of stuff that drives me to go back to work every day and do the work that I do with the team that is situated across the state to try and improve this framework and do justice to the overall exercise. The purpose, really creating a legitimate space for people to do business and to protect consumers in the process. And then obviously on the process side, it's an extensive living process, but one where we face a lot of similar challenges in the regulatory space that often you guys come across. And it's that challenge, right, that makes the job incredibly interesting. Trying to tackle those challenges every day and improve our work and improve the way that it impacts you guys and the communities that you're in. The DCC, I was asked to sort of set the table from a funding standpoint so that some of the other conversations that will be taking place today are contextualized. The department itself is now funded solely by fees of license payers. It is not funded by the Cannabis Tax Fund, which is where all the tax revenue goes from legal commercial cannabis activity. The general fund is a secondary source for some of the regulatory departments across the state, but the tax fund is of interest, and I want to sort of walk you through some of those things since they'll be touched on today. So as I said, the cannabis taxes don't directly fund our operational budget, but they do go to some of the programs that we oversee, and that includes some programs here, actually, some research programs here and across the state. Academic research is funded to support the state's understanding of the impacts of MAUCRSA, as well as medical impacts, economic impacts, decriminalization impacts. $10 million a year goes from that tax fund to the department to fund academic institutions across the state and partnerships at those institutions. As of late, the priority topics of that funding have included the health of the cannabis industry, a continuous assessment of that, California's legacy genetics, cannabinoids and potency, monopolies and unfair competition, and medicinal use and impacts of cannabis. All of these topics are super important. Some of them are incredibly exciting. I was talking to some people last night about the Legacy Genetics project, which is a super exciting project that's being taken on by a number of people in this room. Something that I'm really excited for this community as well as for the overall state of California. It's going to be really incredible. I think we're going to hear more from academics today about that program and some of the outcomes of their research funded by the tax fund. You'll hear more about the Department of Fish and Wildlife Restoration grants And then GoBiz, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, have two noteworthy programs. First is the Equity Grants Program for local jurisdictions. Many of the farmers in here know about that program. And then the California Community Reinvestment Grant Program, which is really focused on, at $50 million a year, reinvesting in the communities that have been impacted by the war on drugs. There's additional funding that go towards CHP and towards law enforcement, but those are some of the ones that I wanted to highlight. There are a lot, and it's a really impressive, I call it a waterfall of funding. We have learned a lot over the last couple of years, and I'll acknowledge we still have a lot left to learn. But I will say, with 60% of California's cities and counties not participating in this exercise that we're all participating in here, there's a lot of work left to do, and there are a lot of cities and counties left to sort of get in the game. And we're trying to help them do that. This limit on licensed retail in particular is extraordinarily challenging to a stable market. And something that I hope, as we continue to have public conversations about the health and viability of the legal industry, officials across the state who have the power to change that, and the people who have the power to hold them accountable, start understanding and start pressing on, because I do think that these challenges can be overcome. The department itself continues to be focused on reducing the regulatory barriers to entry and streamlining our compliance framework. And much of the research that's being done by our academic partners support us in this endeavor, as well as the conversations that we're having with a number of you guys. I will say there's some cool stuff that the department's doing that I hope can lift up the work that you're doing and the things that we'll talk about today. One of those things is our Real California Cannabis campaign. This is Real California Cannabis here in Humboldt. And I think that it's an exciting opportunity to highlight the farmers, the practices, and to help consumers really identify and understand with the beauty of it. So with that, I will plug one other thing. I talked to a lot of students last night about the department, about the work that we do, about the roles, the vast diversity of roles within the department. And I want to encourage you guys to talk to me as well. I think there are a lot of really bright, passionate minds in the room that we would benefit from having plug into the work of the department. So please feel free to find me or my staff. We have Glynis here as well as Kristen. We are a resource to all of you, students, farmers, environmentalists, academics alike. We are here to serve and here to have conversations with you guys. So I'll stop there, but I'll acknowledge I really look forward to the Q&A portion of this and hearing directly from you guys. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my counterparts to tell more about their programs.
Thank you. Oh, Fran's up. Hello. I am Fran Bean. I had to look at the notes. That's not good. That's not a good start. I'm a senior environmental scientist with the Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation. And I am working on the Appalachians program. So I'm pretty lucky. I am a regulator. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. But I'm working on your program. You got this program into Maxura. You collaborated with us as we were developing the program very closely. And when we were going in a direction that was not consistent with the intent, your original intent, you took political action. It was very impressive. So you really steered the direction of this program. So I'm happy to be here. And I'm really learning a lot. Just discussions last night really helped me. Oh, no. There we go. Next one. Nope. Let's start again there. There we go. What is an appellation of origin? It's a name. It's a region's name that is protected. The use of it is protected for a product, for a specific product. That the definition is often used, comes from the Lisbon Agreement. It's an international trade agreement from the late 1950s, which say that that product's characteristics are exclusively a result of where it is produced. The problem with that is that the United States is not a signatory to that agreement. We are a signatory to the TRIPS agreement, which comes in the late 1990s. The problem with that is they don't use the term appellation of origin. They use geographical indication. And they have almost the same definition, except that they say it's essentially due to its origin. So the only difference really is the exclusivity of the appellation of origin. So in the cannabis program in California, there are geographical indications and there is going to be appellation of origins. Real California cheese, real California cannabis, Humboldt cannabis, Mendocino cannabis. These are geographical indications and they're available to all cultivators. So that's a very good thing. If it is cannabis produced in that geographical area, you can use that name. Appellations of origin require a more exclusive connection, such as Napa Valley wine, Happy Valley cannabis, Mattole Valley cannabis, perhaps. Why? Why does the government do this at all? The primary reason you're always going to hear if you start doing research into intellectual property around geographical indications is to prevent misleading, to provide consumers accurate information. But the truth is, internationally, the secondary reasons are often really what they're trying to achieve. Protect legacy communities from cultural appropriation of their product and their names and their history and efforts. To promote regional collaboration around production of a specific product. So how is that exclusively captured in this program and in other appellation of origin programs like wine is through petitioning for protection of that name. You don't have to petition to use Humboldt on your product. If it is all produced in Humboldt, you can use it. To use an appellation of origin, your group of cultivators is going to submit a petition to CDFA, and it's going to describe the history, where it's produced, the area, define that area, and how it's produced, beyond regulatory requirements. So history includes the evidence of the name. You can't make up a name. You can make up a name. That's called the trademark. And that's what you should do if you have something special as an individual cultivator and you want to protect it. An appellation of origin is for your region. You're going to describe your legacy, the economic importance. But a real key here is for the exclusivity is where it's produced. That area is to be defined by geographical features that affect your cannabis. The temperature, the fog, the soil, all these features, how they intersect, define that area by you. Now, those two elements are consistent with the American wine appellation system. The AVAs are defined that way also. What you've made special about the Appellation of Origins program is that you required the inclusion of standards, practices, and cultivars in that petition. And that makes it very different from wine. And that's where the potential, so I think we were told to talk about what's the potential and what are challenges. Well, that's your potential right there, standards and practices for you to promote your values of environmental protection, of regenerative agriculture. That can happen in both standards and practices. Your standards could be, a standard is something measurable, scoreable, certifiable. So it could be an OCal or a Sun and Earth certification. practices can be environmental practices, regenerative farming, more well defined by you. Importantly, you, the stakeholders, also wanted business practices to be allowed in that definition, which is kind of interesting, and then it expands it. Somebody told me last night, well, my practice is putting it in the ground and growing it. But you have the opportunity to promote your values through other ways. Land management. How is the rest of the farm managed? Regenerative agriculture often has an element of polyculture. Is there a requirement for that? Promoting pollinator habitat, all kinds of things. But that's the potential. Thank you. So a strong Appalachian program benefits the environment automatically. How? Initially, anything that incentivizes participation in the legal marketplace, it benefits the environment. So we want you to survive for that alone, and for other reasons. Secondly, it incentivizes outdoor growing. Again, benefiting the environment. And then finally is that potential, your region's specific standards and practices. If you promote things that benefit the environment, then there we go. So realizing that potential, though, it's a three-legged stool, and it depends on all of us. So CDFA developed the regulations in collaboration with the cultivators and subject matter experts. Our primary responsibility will be review of that petition. And the feedback that you've given us is you don't want us to do a checklist. Check, 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 check. You told us your name. You told us this. You want a robust review. So I'm going to remind you of that. The good news is you're going to submit a petition fee. It's pretty significant. It's a few $1,000s. And then there's a subsequent fee at the final stage, which is much larger. But before we're going to ask you for that fee, we're going to work with you to make sure to bring it up. We want it good. We want that petition to be meaningful and robust. So we may be going back and forth on that with no additional fees. It's just to bring it up, make it better. You at any point could say, Fran, I'm tired of dealing with you. But I'm warning you. I'm saying we're going to send it on to subject matter experts for additional review. And I'm trying to help you succeed. But it'll be a collaboration. We'll also be collaborating on, hey, what needs to be fixed in the regs? So we've already done that. We've done a little bit of that, and we've collaborated with DCC. So we're at a real good point in that. We're dealing with issues that when we got separated from cultivators, there were a few issues, regulatory elements that were kind of slipped under the table or just lost. But they're all back on the table. We've recently reintroduced some regulations defining produced, requiring a notice of use. And DCC is discussing those other issues with us too, as they are with you. They reference them in the Cannabis Advisory Committee annual report. And they're actively discussing them right now. So we're at a real good place for that. So DCC has entire enforcement authority. We have no enforcement authority. I have no right to say, hey, I want to come on your farm and look at your practices. DCC, I believe, does. So we're dependent on them for a good program for robust enforcement. And they have expressed strong commitment to that. Even discussing verification stuff, which is beyond enforcement. But so their job is really to help protect the name. The stronger they protect that name against misleading names, the stronger the program. The cultivators, you're the ones who are going to do the petition. So the more meaningful the petition is, the stronger the program. What you present as your practices, that's up to you. I can't control what is brought forth in the petition regarding standards, practices, and cultivars. So I think that's it for me. I hope I didn't take up too much time. I was supposed to get a signal from Ross if I was getting up there. So we're in CDFA, Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation. it's really important that you go on that page and sign up for our listserv so that we can contact you. Part of our collaboration is we need to get back to doing good outreach. We did real good pre-COVID. We had a working group, super constructive, and it's overdue. We need to start hearing from you again. So please get on that list. Contact me with questions. That's my whole name, Francis Bean, and the good news about having a funny name is it's easy to remember. Mr. Bean, that's what young people usually reference. Older people who remember grunge, Nirvana, his kid, that's her name, Francis Bean. Okay, so there's no excuse for not, you don't need to write it down. But contact me. I would put my number up there, but most of the phone calls I get are about like, hey, do you want to refinance your house? So send me an email and then we'll set up a time to call. I'm lonely. She's a big wig. She's very, very busy. I'm a small wig. I'm focused on the Appalachians program. It's your program. We should be talking about it. So let's discuss it.
That was great.
Oh, thank you.
I'll call you.
Huh?
Oh, that's me. Okay. I'm actually going to come up here because as I was extremely organized, first getting ready for this, I was doing my presentation last night. So very late. So I need to see this to kind of give me an idea of what I'm talking about here. So I am Mona Dougherty. I work for the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. I supervise our Northern Cannabis unit, which actually, because of staffing issues, covers our entire region, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. And I also supervise our new Eureka satellite office, which is specifically aimed at cannabis compliance assistance and enforcement. Next slide, please. So this is our mission statement. I'm not going to read it. We have it on our website, and but it is actually very meaningful and important. I think that, one of the, well, maybe I'll read. No, I'm not going to read it. Okay. I think one of the things to really note here is that part of our mission is to restore the quality of California's water resources for our current and future generations, and that just means a lot to me and a lot to the staff I work with. Anyway, next slide, please. Anyway, so this is the map of how the state board and the regional boards work. So we're basically a state agency that regulates the quality of water throughout the state. We're in the, as you guys all know, we're the light green part. I think it's the absolute best region in the state. And I'm so happy to be here and talk to you guys about this. And also to meet you all, because one thing I want to say is that I know a lot about water quality and impacts to water quality. I don't know as much about the actual cannabis, the market, all those things, and I'm happy to learn more about that. I also want to acknowledge here that I'm going to show some photos, which are not indicative of, the majority of cannabis farms, but are among some of the worst things that our staff has seen in inspections. So our staff has done hundreds of inspections, and are really, I wanted to kind of get across the driving point of why we have our cannabis discharges regulatory program. Next slide, please. So one of the things to note is that land use is the primary driver of water quality and degradation of water quality. We have a really amazing region. We have the most surface water of any region in California. I think this is, promotes and provides a habitat for a lot of amazing species. Anadromous salmonids, which are so important to people of California, and especially Native American people who use these as sometimes as subsistence fishing and really important to the cultural heritage. So we have a lot of surface water. There can be a lot of impacts from land use on our surface waters, and we have a lot of sensitive species, a lot of endangered species in our region that are of primary importance to our staff. So this is a little bit about why land use is so important to our agency. The steep slopes, the soils, the surface waters that are in a lot of our region result in a really easy erosion and sediment discharge, which impacts salmonids and lots of species when it is in surface waters, as well as the drinkability of water and other beneficial uses, swimming, that kind of stuff. Next slide, please. So, like I said, one of the primary drivers for our agency is reducing sediment discharge. The majority of sediment discharge comes not from the actual farming area, but from construction and maintenance of roads. So here we see some not very good construction of roads. A lot of mass grading, a lot of potential for erosion and sediment discharge when it rains. Next slide, please. Here is another issue we see some of, which is constructing of on-stream ponds, or in this case, a pond in a wetland. Next slide. Here we have an on-stream failing pond. So landslides, as you all know, are a big issue in our region as well, and construction of roads and ponds are really one of the main drivers of landslides. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide, please. I hate animation. There's another example of some issues that we see in inspections, which is poorly stored or disposed of chemicals near waterways, in waterways too, and some of our big concerns. Next slide, please. So here is an example of the power of restoration. On our left, we have the discharge of sediment and impacts the waterways, and then the same spot when some restoration has occurred. The main driver for our permit is not only the protection of the land so that waste discharges are less likely to impact water quality, but restoring impacts that have already occurred. Next slide, please. Here's another example of that. We have a road that was poorly constructed and caused a lot of impacts to the stream. Then we have some restoration over there. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of our program. Regulating cannabis, the discharges of waste. After we do not regulate cannabis, we regulate the discharges of waste from cannabis. We adopted in 2015 the first permit for cannabis cultivation, and because it wasn't legal at that point, we wanted folks to not have to say that they're cannabis cultivators, and the permit was for cannabis cultivation and activities with similar environmental effects. At that point, the focus for our staff was doing education outreach. We did over 100 education and outreach events, media, lots of opportunities to get the word out about our permit and why we think it's important. We also partnered with resource conservation districts and others to provide technical assistance for grants and help, give, on-site assessments to help with grant funding of different projects. And then in 2017, the State Water Board, which is our parent agency, adopted a statewide cannabis permit that had a lot of similarities with the one that we adopted just in our region, but some differences as well. And some of the similarities were that a focus on riparian protection, keeping maintenance of culverts and other sediment sources, as well as keeping any nutrients or any other types of chemicals out of waterways. And then also I just wanted to highlight here, because it's near and dear to my heart, that We, in 2018, opened a Eureka office, which is a little satellite office of our Santa Rosa main office, and also allowed me, who grew up here and actually graduated from Humboldt engineering in 2000, to move home. So that was wonderful. And it's been great. This office is intended to provide a way for people in this area to have more access to our staff. Now, it was a bit disrupted with COVID, but we do want to provide as much assistance as we can to folks who have questions about water quality or how to comply with permits. So this is my last slide. I just wanted to show so you can get a statewide perspective on the number. The green are the number of permitted sites in the state of California for cannabis cultivation through our agency, and then in blue we have the number of water diversions, surface water diversions that happen in the state. And you can see why this is such an important program for our region, how central our region is to some of the potential impacts from cannabis cultivation and water diversion, as well as lots of other land uses. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Cheri Sanville, and I'm here on behalf of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Cannabis Restoration Grant Program. And thank you for inviting us to participate. We're really glad to be here. And I'm really pleased to be back on campus. I first came here in 1997 for graduate school to study botany and mycology. And I was first introduced to the dangers of cannabis cultivation as something to look out for if you were out on a mushroom foray or botanizing or even looking for a room to rent in a house. So there were no symposiums like this, and certainly not a cannabis studies major. The impacts and contributions of cannabis in our communities and on our local landscapes has changed dramatically over the last 25 years. And we have a unique opportunity right now to leverage cannabis tax funds to improve environmental conditions and assist qualified cultivators with licensing, sustainable cultivation, and environmental stewardship. So pursuant to Revenue and Taxation Code 34019, a portion of the Cannabis Tax Fund is deposited into the Environmental Restoration and Protection Account. The purpose of the allocation received by our program, the Cannabis Restoration Grant Program, is to facilitate environmental stewardship by providing financial assistance for projects that clean up, remediate, and restore areas impacted by cultivation or related activities, and most importantly, to provide support of local partnerships for these purposes. So the Cannabis Tax Code permits CDFW to distribute a portion of the funds through grants, and we are currently managing $20 million in grant projects. Next slide. So the Cannabis Restoration Grant Program is committed to promoting ecosystem restoration and ecological health throughout California. We aim to fund a diversity of projects throughout the state in various ecoregions and with multiple conservation benefits. Projects must contribute to the objectives of the tax fund allocation as well as to the mission of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So grant proposals must be submitted by an eligible applicant, and eligible applicants are tribes, nonprofits, authorized to do business in California, and any public agencies within California. And we have currently these two funding opportunities available, and I will trust you to read a lot of the detail there, and I'll just hit some of the main points. So for the qualified cultivator funding opportunity, we are seeking high quality grant proposals that assist cannabis cultivators in managing California's natural resources. So to be a qualified cultivator, this is aimed at the smaller cultivator. There's priority for those who are cultivating 10,000 square feet of canopy or less. And you must have, at minimum, a provisional license to be considered a qualified cultivator. So the projects are for qualified cultivators to do one of these several things. So to assist in transitioning from a provisional to an annual license, to implement sustainable cultivation methods, to improve water conservation, any of those, one or more of those things need to be in place. Projects must also include co-benefits. So in addition to benefiting qualified cultivators, the grant proposals must also provide co-benefits. So species conservation, promoting equity, habitat improvements, those kinds of things. So some of the work we've funded so far under this opportunity includes planning, implementation, and capacity building to support cultivation practices, rainwater collection systems, water storage, invasive species management, watercourse crossing upgrades, and other projects that might be covered under a qualified cultivator's lake and streambed alteration agreement. The second grant opportunity that's open is the cleanup, remediation, and watershed enhancement. And again, we are seeking high quality grant proposals to improve conditions in watersheds and habitats impacted by cannabis cultivation. So these projects need to fall in one of the following project types: cleanup and remediation of impacts due to illicit cannabis operations on qualified public or qualified private land, road treatments, or water conservation. And then all proposals submitted under that opportunity must also accomplish one or more other objectives, and that is to clean up, remediate, restore, or enhance native species or their habitat impacted by cannabis activities, reduce delivery of toxic materials and waste to the environment by removing infrastructure and contaminants associated with illegal cultivation, or to alleviate a limiting factor within the impacted environment. And some of the projects that we've funded under that opportunity so far include cleanup and remediation on public lands in over 10 counties, flow enhancement projects, road treatments to reduce sediment impacts to anadromous fish, and assessing a wildlife conscious certification pilot program through studying specific farming practices. And some of our partners on that project are definitely here today. And also some of our other projects. So we are very much focused on the legal part, or the local partnership part of our mission in this grant program. And we encourage inclusion and consultation with tribal members, the incorporation of traditional ecological knowledge into project planning, design, and implementation when it's applicable. Some of the eligible grant expenses could be things such as providing materials and services in the language that the communities the grant is serving actually speak. Those are considered eligible expenses to really make sure we're reaching the cultivators. Grant proposals that include local equity applicants, licensees, or local equity programs all receive higher scores. So one of the most important aspects in putting together a grant proposal is to have a dynamite team. It really comes down to the relationships and the people you have doing the work. The proposal must demonstrate that the team has the qualifications, experience, and capacity to perform the proposed tasks. And the eligible applicant very well may not have the skill sets required to do the work that they are going to submit a proposal for. And so they need to find partners and qualified experts and put together the team that can do the work. Local challenges require local solutions, yet locally and elsewhere in the state, eligible applicants with the qualifications, experience, and capacity is a limiting factor and can be a barrier to accessing our grant funds. So in recognition of that, we are focusing a lot of our granting on building capacity. So small or emerging nonprofits can get a capacity building grant from us. They'll still need to meet the criteria of either of these two funding opportunities, but we're willing to provide more technical assistance, match people together, and give them an opportunity to build their organization so that they can reach more cultivators. And we believe that by doing that, it'll result in more grant proposals from those entities that are the implementation that comes from the capacity building planning stage that we funded at first, that they'll have built their outreach to the cultivation community they're serving, found the appropriate experts, and that will streamline their next round at getting a grant and further the impact. So we believe that this will broaden the reach of access to our grant funds and get them better directed where the need is greatest. So eligible applicants, qualified cultivators, and expert practitioners of environmental services and tech, biologists, engineers, restorationists, geologists, all of the things that this university is so good at providing experts in. They're all needed to design and implement successful, impactful, and resilient projects. And the first step in the application process is for an eligible entity to contact our grant program and schedule a consultation. Gosh, words this morning. So we'll discuss your concept, your ideas, and it's often a very iterative process. And then there's a pre-application, and then folks are invited to do a full application after that. So in summary, the purpose of our grant program is to facilitate environmental stewardship by providing assistance for local partnerships with the knowledge, experience, and relationships needed to make a significant contribution to the environment and to the legal cultivation community. And then we are welcoming your creative solutions, your unprecedented partnerships, and bold initiatives. We are a program of staff that think outside the box, that see obstacles as, opportunities. And so don't think that you have an idea and it doesn't really fit very closely with maybe one of these two opportunities that are open and continuous, these two grant funds right now. Don't shelve your idea too quickly without consulting with us first. We might think of a way that it really fits right in. So, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of you. I think that's a really helpful, sort of instructive overview of both, from my perspective, the programs that you all are working on. And also, I hope that sort of gives, I know it gives me, and I hope it gives everyone here sort of a sense for the different ways in which different agencies are approaching this issue and the different sort of perspectives that I think are important to this conversation. So I maybe hoped or planned to facilitate some follow-up questions. But Dominic has just let me know that we should be wrapping this up by around 10:25. And I really want to make sure that there's an opportunity for everyone here to ask questions. So I think my thought would be just to open this up directly to audience Q&A. So my understanding is the students here have some roving microphones. And so if folks want to raise their hands, I'm happy to start taking questions. So Steve, I see your hand up and happy to start with you.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you everybody for being here today. I'm Steve Madrone, one of Humboldt County's Board of Supervisors. And now that we're past Measure A, thank goodness, we're going to, at the board, anyway, so at the board, we're going to be having lots of discussions about incentives and and how we can further incentivize the industry to help make it through this difficult period. One of those concepts might be that, there was a lot of jealous money grants from the department and others to do storage and forbearance, work on roads, do energy conversions to solar, etc. But those monies are running out, and there's still a tremendous need in the farmer world to be able to do those measures. So while we would love to see the state engage in a statewide incentive program, we're thinking that maybe at the county we could bring forward an incentive program, kind of like the solar tax credits, the energy tax credits that you can do under tax form right now. What about land stewardship tax credits? So perhaps we can just use this Measure S taxes as a vehicle for us to say, if you install storage and forbearance and you do energy conversions and road measures, they go above and beyond requirements, that you should be able to write that off against your Measure S taxes as a direct incentive to encourage more of that investment. It would be wonderful if the state could do that with the state funds that you receive from licenses and or other means. So I just wanted to mention that. I'm hoping that we can get that pilot going here in the county, but it would be wonderful if we could do that statewide, not just for cannabis, for all agriculture and for other practices as well. So just wanted to share that thought with you and see if you had any response you might offer.
Well, I just want to acknowledge and say thank you from the local level, also being part of a solution on this front. I think you're pointing to a number of funding sources. One is the local jurisdiction assistance grant funding that we were able to secure when the state had a lot more general fund. And I think that sent around 17 to 18 million, I think, to this specific county. And of the licensees in this room, I think it was about 50 million overall that's represented by the counties in this room. So a significant portion came to northern counties to support the local governments as well as the licensees, and it's been awesome to see how Humboldt has deployed that funding to support much of the things that we're talking about today in this room. But to your point, I think there's a lot more that can be done, both on the local level when it comes to strategically, smartly, hopefully using tax revenue in support of the licensees. And there will always be more space to have those conversations on the state level.
Great. Dylan, is your hand?
As we heard and we understand, this is a fee-funded program, the DCC, which in reality incentivizes permitting for the agency, which has led to unlimited licensing and size. In the promise of Prop 64, there was supposed to be a period of restricted size of cultivation to bring existing farms into the system and encourage market stability before opening that door wide open. We now have the reality of that opportunity having passed due to the striking from the regs of those restrictions. My question is, what is the end game for licensing? We've seen mass attrition of legacy farms in the rural regions while simultaneously seeing an explosion of new cultivation, both legal and illicit, in areas that traditionally were not known for growing. This has led to the current state of affairs across the board. I appreciate all the programs that are being talked about, but the reality is we don't have rural farmers in the northern region. None of these programs are going to matter, including Appalachians. Is there a plan to right this ship, and what is the end game for licensing?
Big question. So thank you for asking that question, and that's a conversation. I mean, those are concerns that we've heard a lot while we've been up here, but just since the department's been created, which was after that decision was made, and before my time in this role. So I can't answer to what happened, but what we're all faced with is the here and now, as you acknowledge, and how we move forward. The department's been trying to do a lot to support, in particular, farmers in this region. Things from in the 2.5 years that we've been in existence, pulling down that $100 million fund to support specifically legacy small equity operators across the state, and that's why you saw such a heavy portion come up north. We have done the mixed light to outdoor conversion. We just implemented SB 833, which was done in partnership with your representative in the state legislature, to try and help farmers in particular adjust their timeframes for when they're making seasonal decisions, including rationing down operations, putting it inactive without relinquishing your license operations, and of course changing the time frame of your license that one time to help you make the year ahead decisions that you need to. We put a dashboard on our website to try and give you access to the data that we have access to give you a better picture of what that market looks like. We were very instrumental, and this might be slightly contentious in this room, but maybe not, in lifting up your voices in getting the cultivation tax suspended. Those are all things that we've done because we've been in conversation with you all in this space. We've been able to hear and understand the impacts that the broad framework have on your business. And we've tried to help lift up those voices, either direct them to the appropriate people in the legislature to have those discussions because they need to learn about those impacts, and lift them up in the hearings that we've been called into as well. Those are things that we're trying to do. I think your question is asking what we intend to do down the road, right? And this is a topic that has come up in conversations just the last couple of days. I think you might be alluding to license caps around production. That is an issue that we can always discuss, right? But we do not, as a department, have the statutory authority to turn off licensing. So it can be a local conversation, it can be a state legislature conversation, and where we will play a role in that conversation from a technical assistance standpoint is we will lean on our economists. We will lean on states that have done it before to make sure that we're lifting up what we believe those impacts could be of that policy decision, good or bad, so that policymakers can make decisions with transparent information. And part of that discussion is your voice in the room. So that's what I would point to as, in the conversations we've been having, the practical implications of that. I'll also say one other really important thing too. This state has, as you know, a history of producing a lot more cannabis than we consume. Californians can only consume so much cannabis. And we work with our academics to understand what we think that amount is. We have space in our legal market. The product that you guys are creating, there is still more consumption capacity. The important part of that is how you get consumers that safe and responsible access. So when I point to those jurisdictions that are not providing access, they are part of the problem too, which is why we're focusing a lot of energy on trying to inform consumers about the benefits of purchasing the products that you create, and also the communities that are participating, the benefits of creating those pathways, all while trying to make sure we're creating a California sort of brand, if you will, for you for the day that, you guys have a brand, candidly, right? But like California for the day the walls come down and this product can go across state lines legally. So those are the things that we're trying to do, and that's sort of where we're situated to help in those conversations. I hope that answered your question.
I want to ask maybe a brief follow-up to that, Nicole, and then maybe we can open back up to audience questions. I hear a lot about the acreage cap and the effect of this large-scale production has had on our community. I know you've heard a lot about it as well. Another thing I hear about a lot in terms of solutions is really people's concerns about the fragmentation of the supply chain and the way in which, as farmers, we're cut off from access to retail, cut off from access to consumers. And so I know you've heard a lot about the importance of direct-to-consumer sales. And I wanted to ask if the department is interested in supporting pathways for direct-to-consumer sales for small farmers.
I so appreciate you asking that question, Ross. So the department doesn't take positions on bills until we're authorized to. But what I will say is conceptually, the department deeply appreciates the objective of direct-to-consumer sales and wants to be able to do it in a way that doesn't cost you more in fees, but that supports that overall objective and preserves it for you. So that is where the department is on that issue. And I think at the end of the day, as with Ross and with Janine and others in this room working on that policy, it's really about devils in the details and how that's implemented. Because we know through experience as a department, when we're asked to implement something, it has to be practical, or there are going to be outcomes that are unintended but harmful to the people that we work with. So that's what we're working on with Ross, with Janine, with others in this room to try and make feasible.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
Wow, so many hands. Suzanne, I have to.
Thank you very much for coming today. We all appreciate being here and coming. I'm at a consulting firm. We have been helping only farmers. Something that's coming in daily is the situation with CFW. And we are in a natural cycle of 5 years expiring laws and LSAs. And we've been in this process for the last year. CFW, I really trying to be very gentle in saying this, but there is a cooperation. There is not a willingness to have open dialogue with extending the extensions. There's delays. There aren't enough trucks to get the inspectors out to the sites. Multiple cancellations because of the trucks not being available. Have folks that are telling us that their extension will not be approved until they complete the work. We're asking for an extension to get the work completed.
Suzanne, appreciate the question, but if it's possible to get to the question, I know you need to give context, so I appreciate that as well.
Is there any way that we can come to the CFW and discuss grants and extensions? Because we have people who are going to have to get pulled out of the grant because they're not getting extensions approved. And it's become a big crisis. We're all trying to work on the guidelines that have been provided. And of all the various agencies, CFW is scaring us to death. Have licenses at risk.
I think
We have examples.
I think the question is clear, so I want to make sure to give our panelists an opportunity to answer. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will do my best to give you an answer, but I mean, I'm here representing the Cannabis Restoration Grant Program, which is very separate from the Lake and Streambed Alteration Permitting and Enforcement Program, and I suspect you're talking about representing cultivators here in Humboldt, maybe Mendocino, Trinity, so in this Region 1. So it's the Region 1 office that is responsible for all the decisions that are going to affect those LSA agreements and extensions. I do know we have that situation where, especially for the qualified cultivators that we want to include in a grant to do work on their LSA to implement it, and they need to make sure that that LSA is in good standing at the time the grant funds are provided to implement those projects. And we do communicate closely with regional staff and LSAs, but I think the main parts of your issue are not something that the grant program can do much other than to say we will sit at the table anytime we have a grant applicant or grantee and an LSA issue that needs to get resolved. We're very happy to engage on that. And I don't know if my management's here. I don't know if they want to add anything to that.
Oh, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Curran. I'm the program manager that oversees the Cannabis Restoration Grant Program. Cheri mentioned, we are always open to come to the table with any of your guys' ideas, especially as qualified cultivators. It's a big push for us right now in the program to get you guys to full licensure and in compliance, especially with the LSAs. We work very closely with our LSA team. And so it's really just about reaching out to our program and trying to set up that consultation, and we can try to help as much as we can. That's what we're here for. We have information, flyers we can hand out later for you guys for contact information, if that would be helpful. But we are always interested from hearing from you and want to help as much as possible.
It doesn't feel that way. I'm so sorry. We've been trying for years.
I understand.
Before, so that this didn't happen. It's happening.
So I hope y'all can have a conversation and sort of follow up on this. I'm really glad we're all in the same room so we can have these conversations. Dominic, can I take one more question? Or
yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let's try to keep it to a question. And we appreciate that. Like, there's a lot of suffering going on, a lot of trauma, and in this room, we want to focus on moving forward and dealing with the challenges. That's what we want to be doing today.
Thanks, Dominic. Maggie, is here.
Hi, my name is Maggie. I'm from Nevada County in Sierra Foothills. Very different scenario. We're part of the Central Valley Water Board. But part of, as Dominic just said, moving forward, looking at solutions, I think something that's really helpful to do that, especially in the year 2024, I think that everybody in this room probably is like a little bit on the same page as to how standard agriculture, especially here in California, has gone environmentally, and what the situation is in the Central Valley, and the scale of that, and just the impacts of that going forward, and that's maybe not what we want to continue, and that we need really positive, sort of revolutionary new visions. And it is leaders of agencies like you who I think should be the ones holding that vision. And so I would like to ask you what that vision is that you are holding and that you are steering your teams with, and what you want the future of agriculture, cannabis agriculture in this state.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. So I'll kick it off. Maybe we just go down. So I think your point is well taken, and something that I frequently hear specifically in this area, right? Like, while there are benefits of being treated like agriculture, there are downsides. There are consequences to the way agricultural, the sort of regulation of agriculture has occurred historically, and the impacts on community, on the physical ground, right, on access to resources. And so from my perspective as a department, and much of this is done in partnership with these departments up here, right? And they have a very important role in that discussion. But as a department, it's a conversation we have frequently, which is the differences, like identifying those differences between how cannabis and ag are treated, right? And really having those robust discussions about where that should be, there should be parity, and where cannabis is reflective of what that future state should be. So as we talk about streamlining, as we talk about reducing barriers, I think it's a constant sort of give and take to find what that balance should be, because I think you're right. And this community and the practices of this community are a reflection of how historically it hasn't been done well, right? It hasn't been done right. And what that future looks like, I think, is up in the air, is a discussion point between all of us. So I can't say what it is, but I can say that conversation is important, and we need to move towards that. Not that this right here, what we have or what we control as a department, is perfect, but making sure that we're continuously moving towards that what is.
Thanks, Nicole. I'd love to hear from the other panelists as well.
I don't think it's appropriate for me to speak for the Department of Food and Ag on whole. Personally, it's an exciting opportunity with legalization to see the development of an industry that could be ethical and sustainable, That's my personal beliefs. The Appalachians program has the potential to be a tool to achieve that, and I know that in collaboration with DCC, they've been supporting us in trying to make that a strong program for that purpose. So I don't want to take up too much time.
So I guess from the water board perspective, well, actually, I'll start with my own perspective first. One of the concerns that I have shared in our agency and with others when I talk to them is that our country, maybe most countries, have not found a way to support small scale agriculture in the way it deserves to be supported. And I have a lot of disagreements with some of the policy built around agriculture as a whole. I would love to see a way to have the cannabis break that pattern of have cannabis cultivation break that pattern and see support for smaller cultivators. How that occurs, a lot of that, frankly, and I don't want to pass the buck or something, that a lot of those policy decisions are not within the scope of what myself and my staff work on. One of the things that a focus for us has been within what we can do is we are directed to focus on unlicensed, unpermitted cultivators. We spend more time on enforcement than we do on compliance assistance. I wish we had more time for compliance assistance. We actually had half of our staff cut a couple years ago, which has really undercut our ability to do more compliance assistance. But enforcement on illegal cultivators is a really important thing to do. We want to level the playing field. We want to move people to the legal market in hopes that the legal market will succeed. Anyway, those are some of the thoughts from myself and my agency about that. A lot of the policy decisions on, how agriculture is allowed is not ones that we can make in our agency, unfortunately.
I think a lot of the opening remarks really resonate with the values and goals of our Cannabis Restoration Grant Program, and that for a successful grant proposal, we are relying on partnerships with eligible entities, and we are not working directly with the cultivators in most cases. And so we need those folks who are really in tune with the community that they're working with, what the obstacles are, and what opportunities there are. The OG back to the land cultivators that are still staying, and they might have legacy timber impacts on their property that just has sat there for years, and now there's potentially an opportunity with grant funding and their licensing requirements to get that done. So we are really excited about where the win-win for the environment and the cultivation community can be. But we are just the facilitators. We're not the ones who are creating the project. So we need you all to talk to each other, form those partnerships, come up with a plan, and then send your application through a qualified applicant. And hopefully we can start to kind of move things back to more of a restoration and, ecological living out in the hills.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of you for sharing all this information, for sharing all this perspective. If we could give a round of applause.